Now, one of my earliest memories from childhood is me and my sisters going to a supermarket with my dad. My dad took us shopping for Christmas presents, and we were so excited to go there, to go to the supermarket. And my dad took us to the toy section of the supermarket and told us to pick out any toy we wanted. And I remember my sisters going to this very big vat, this big bucket like thing that was filled with dolls, colorful dolls. One type of doll, it was one design, but they were different colors. And they both picked out their doll. An interesting thing about the dolls that they picked out, I still think about it now, and it just makes me wonder how excited they were and how happy they were. I saw my sister's eyes light up just having these dolls. And these dolls, for those of you that grew up in the 80s, early 90s, much early 90s, because these dolls got phased out in the 90s, but they were very popular in the 80s. Nearly every girl I knew had these dolls. They were plastic dolls. Plastic dolls. These dolls had their hands beside them. I think they had one hand holding a flower or a rabbit or something like that. The one hand was holding something, and the other hand was right by their side, like they were standing at attention. Their legs were together, and the hands were by the side, one hand holding a flower or a rabbit or a teddy bear. I don't know what, but one hand was holding something, and the other hand was just molded to the side. And the hair, the entire doll was one giant plastic mold. Giant plastic mold in one color. The entire thing from head to toe was either red, blue, green, yellow, was one color. And they were so excited by this toy, this doll that they had. Very happy to take it home. And so I went and I got a toy space gun, got a space gun that sounded like a blender. Sounded like a blender, but it had some kind of light at the tip of it. It had a red plastic transparent tip that when you press the trigger, you pull the trigger, it will come out with some kind of light, and then bzzz, bzzz. That was all. That was all it did, and I was so happy. Very cheap plastic, you understand? If it fell on the floor, it would probably break from a reasonable height. To break, you didn't have stand a chance. And we went home and we were so happy about these toys we had. And I think what really blows my mind was that doll. Those dolls that my sisters had. They were the same thing, just different colors. One mold. One mold. You couldn't comb the hair. The hair was molded on. So there was no hair. There was no hair texture. Everything was plastic. The eyes couldn't blink. You couldn't take the arms apart and bend them in any direction. You couldn't take off the clothes or change the clothes. You couldn't bend the knees or change the shoes. You couldn't do any of these things people are able to do with dolls today. But then, a couple of years later, much into the 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, Barbies started coming to Nigeria. People started having Barbies. So people would travel abroad and come back with this new doll called a Barbie. I remember my sister seeing the Barbie for the first time, and it put in them a disdain for all the other dolls they'd had. As in, this was different. It had a skeletal system. You could bend the hand. It was made up of some kind of special rubber. You could comb the hair. Now that was very, very interesting to them. You could comb the hair. Up until that time, combing the hairs of doll was almost non-existent. You couldn't comb the hair. The hair was molded it was a rubber mold that was just part of the scalp. But here you could comb the hair. The hair had texture. You could change, take off the shoes, put on the shoes, and stuff like that. And then, every young girl started desiring a Barbie. And I was having a discussion with my family today about how branding has made our life as humans more complicated. And I see branding every day pretty much destroy human life, the human essence. Branding. Now, I worked for a very long time in branding. I still work in branding. I still see I still see the world through the eyes of a brand designer. Um, I look at things, I look at the material, I look at the functionality, I look at the color choice. When I look at something, I look at the font choice, whether it works. Um, so I still do a lot of branding. I, I advise people based on how functional their branding is. But then I realized that there are two types of branding. There's empathetic branding, empathetic functional branding, where you look at something and you look whether it's functional enough, whether it works well, and whether it understands the journey of the consumer and the need of the consumer. It understands the need of the consumer and meets that need and even surpasses the need. That's empathetic branding. Where you look at something and you're like, does this meet a need? So you look at a blender and you're like, does this meet the modern woman's need to blend particular things? So when you're introducing a blender to the market, you kind of look at, what do women blend? What kind of things do they blend? Is this blender strong enough? Are the blades strong enough? Does it work? Would it fully serve that woman, that blender that you're selling to her? Can she store it away easily? Store it away easily and put it away easily. Is it too heavy? Is it easy to set up? Can she set it up without hurting herself? That's empathetic branding. Would it look good in a kitchen? Would it look good? Would it make a kitchen look more colorful? That's empathetic branding. That's cool. But that's not the branding that we have today and majorly in today's world. What we have in today's world a lot is what I call manipulative branding and capitalistic branding, where you are trying to work in people a need rather than solve a problem, where you're trying to develop a need that did not even have, but you're trying to instill a need in them rather than create a solution to the needs they have. Is manipulative branding, capitalistic branding. And that's what's destroying people's lives. The issue I have with branding today is we have come to this place where we are beginning to give things, we are beginning to attribute human emotions to things. Human emotions to things. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. And I see so many people, approach me, even when I was working as a designer, and they're trying to come up with a product for which people would have a human emotion affiliation towards. And what I mean is, people don't buy cars anymore because of their functionality, because it gets them from point A to point B. Yes, in some comfort, yes, with some speed, but then that's not the reason why people buy cars anymore. I once read an article, or I think I watched a video where Cardi B was being interviewed, and she said she really doesn't know how to drive. But here she was showing off her, you know, high end vehicles, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. And the guy that was interviewing her asked her, so why do you have these cars? She said, and she said, I have them to take photos with them. Photos for TikTok, photos for social media. She bought the cars to take photos with them, not to drive them, not to get from point A to point B, not for the speed of getting from one place to another, not for the comfort of getting from one place to another. She bought these cars to build her esteem. And that's the problem with manipulative branding. Manipulative branding plants a seed of insecurity in people. An insecurity that they tell you can only be covered up by an item. It might be a car, it might be a wristwatch, it might be a shoe, it might be a purse, it might be a wig, it might be an electronic. But they tell you that's the only thing that can cover up that insecurity. It's a dangerous type of branding, and it builds up addictions in people. Because once you take that item and you cover up that insecurity with that item, in a short time, they come up with another one that tells you this is better. Cover up your insecurity with this one. And then the one you bought a year ago doesn't seem good enough. It's a big problem. It's the Western way of branding, and it's destroying human beings. Where human beings do not know what they need anymore, but they are told what to need. That's what my sisters didn't have when we walked into that shopping mall that day. They did, when we went to that supermarket, we had no idea what we wanted to get. They had not seen a doll that they wanted, I had not seen a space gun that I wanted. We just went there and thought of what caught our interest. So they got this doll that has no brand name. If you can Google it, you can Google it. Plastic dolls from the 80s or 70s. Just Google plastic dolls, colorful plastic dolls. You'll see them. They just saw a doll. They didn't buy it because it was a cool status symbol. They didn't buy it because of the brand name. It had no brand name. No tags, no label, nothing, no packaging. It was just in a bucket. And they just picked it. I bought that space gun, no brand name. Just a space gun that seemed interesting to me. And we were happy. I think of my kids today, and they're so conscious of what you buy for them. So the first thing when you buy something for a kid, when a kid has a birthday, whether my kids or their friends or their nieces, their nephews, you kind of look at it and you're like, hope I'm buying the original one. So you buy a Barbie. But now they tell you it's not the Barbie they wanted. It's not the one they wanted. They wanted the one that has hiking clothes, the one that has a dinner cloth. I was dressed for dinner, the one that comes with Ken, the one that comes with a car, has special features. So they're not just satisfied that you get them a Barbie. It has to be the Barbie reigning in the season before they become happy. If you buy a pair of shoes, running shoes for anyone, young guy, young girl, children, they're looking at it to see whether it has the swoosh. It doesn't matter how functional it is anymore. It doesn't matter how good the design is. So people don't buy for functionality anymore. And that's why brands have become so desperate. That's why influencing has become so strong. Because it doesn't matter how good your product is. If it's not trendy, if the name is not strong, you would have a problem selling. That's the problem with manipulative capitalistic branding. When people start giving emotions and attributes that we should have as human beings from the outside, we start earning it from the inside. We start earning it from the outside. Attributes that we should have from within, that we should dig deep down into ourselves to have from within. We start buying them from companies. Then there's a problem. I can't tell you how many videos I've watched that tell me that certain products, when you buy them, you're not buying this, you are buying that. You're buying an emotion. And they say it matter of fact, like it's a good thing. They tell you when you buy a Mercedes Benz, you're not buying a car, you're buying prestige. But the thing is that prestige should not be for sale. Prestige should be something you dig down deep into yourself and unearth. You do not buy prestige. You discover it. When they tell you buy this, you buy, Coke had this slang, they had this slogan, open up happiness. When you feel like opening a bottle or a can unleashes happiness, then there's a problem. Because happiness is not stored in a can. Happiness is something you discover as a human being within yourself by knowing what your values are and what your purpose is. Happiness comes by serving. But then branding tells us the opposite. Manipulative branding. It's the disease in the world today. It's a disease. When Apple tells you their phone makes you cool, cool is not something you buy. Cool is something you are. By being yourself, walking the way you walk, talking the way you talk, being yourself, owning your personality. But Apple tells you that cool is a phone. The phone you use is the description of cool. Little wonder you have people committing crimes to purchase an Apple phone, an iPhone, which by the next year becomes outdated. So you need to upgrade your cool. They tell you Ferrari status. Is it really? And that's why someone like Cardi B can buy a car worth a lot of money. She doesn't drive it, just takes photos with it. Because she believes it builds her status. The question is, what will she do to keep that status? What is she willing to do to keep that status? What is she willing to do to get an upgraded form of that status? If it doesn't come from within, it will always be a burden. Capitalistic branding. Capitalistic branding is making the human being smaller and the product bigger. The human being has become so small and so insecure but we've built ourselves an armor of products, an armor that we are told to upgrade every few months or every year. I'm reading a book, and I read it before, but I'm reading it all over again. It's a pretty interesting book. It's called The Pro The Progress Paradox. The Progress Paradox is by a man called Greg Easterbrook. If you can get if you can get the book, I would advise you to get it. It's a really good book. The Progress Paradox. It talks about how life gets better while people feel worse. How life gets better while people feel worse. The reason why I would advise you to read the book is because it paints a good picture of the Western world today and how life has gotten better compared to how life was many years ago in the early 60s or 50s. How technology has actually improved life. But then, as time keeps going, people get more depressed. And you would expect that since things are getting faster, it's easier to do certain things, houses are getting bigger, cars are faster, you know, television, more colorful, photos come out faster, you think people will be happier. But the book talks about how people have become sad. The opposite is happening, they're not happier. They've lost their identity. Why I'm reading the book? Because it's very interesting how the Western world, like the United States, the United Kingdom, how they are already painting a picture of where we would be in Africa in the next couple of years. They've already walked ahead of us. This, manipulative branding only came to Nigeria maybe in the mid 90s, early 2000s. Manipulative branding wasn't strong in Nigeria. People bought soap because it worked well. They bought cars because they ran well. It wasn't really about status symbol. It wasn't really about it then. It was about, does it work? Does it clean my clothes? Will the jeans last? Does the shirt last? You understand? But around the late 90s, manipulative branding, with the advent of the internet and TV and cable TV, came our introduction to manipulative capitalistic branding. But the US has been onto it for years now and has only brought sadness and consumerism to their lives. Their lives have only gotten smaller and sadder. And that's where we're going. They've already painted a template of what our lives will be like. And that's why the depression rate, even in Nigeria, has risen, even though technology keeps rising, advancing technology. The Western nations show us where we would be emotionally and psychologically, but a lot of us don't pay attention because we look at the smoke screen too much. We don't see how many people are medicated abroad for depression from a very young age because the human being has gotten smaller while the products have gotten bigger. The biggest addiction is not the drug addiction, it's the addiction things like technology, clothes, status, trend. That's exactly where we're going. I remember growing up and my dad, the first car I remember my dad having, I don't even know what model the car was. It was a very boxy car, boxy brown car. It had no brand. We were not concerned about the brand name. We just had a car that took us to school and took us to church, and we were happy about that. It was a car. We had to come up with a, a name for it. We used to call it Dendembula. That's what we decided to call it. That's how uninterested we were about the manufacturer's name. And then Mercedes Benz started being imported to Nigeria. And I could begin to see the attitude of my dad change towards the car. Here he was, he had this purple Mercedes Benz. But then it was always kept under a tarp, put a tarp over it. And he would only drive it once in a while on Sundays and then back and pack it and put a tarp over it. And I used to wonder, why have a car that you can't drive around and you only drive it for a few hours one day in the week, and then when you get back you just put a tarp over it and you don't even get to admire it? And there was Dendembula just there using it every day and open, everybody could see it. I saw my dad's attitude change towards his cars. And then we became more conscious about what kind of car we were in. What kind of car was driving us to school? Was it a Mercedes Benz? Did it have air conditioning? What material were the seats? And we became less grateful about having a car take us to school and more conscious about the type of car that was taking us there. Manipulative branding. It's destroying us as humans. I want you to know that status is not in an item. Status is a human emotion. And the true original status can only be found within you. Not in a shop, not in a shopping mall, not in an item. Prestige is a human emotion for humans that is discovered and not bought. Happiness cannot be bought. Not in a fizzy drink. Happiness is within you, it's in your spirit. Confidence cannot be bought. Confidence is in knowing who you are and owning who you are. It's definitely not in a phone. It isn't. If we look at the indices of the Western world, we will begin to realize that the result of capitalistic branding and manipulative branding is always sadness. Is always sadness and depression and striving for more. Capitalistic branding is one of the reasons why you find people working jobs that they don't like, because it allows them to earn money to afford things that they do not really need and hang out with people that they don't really like. Branding itself is a beautiful thing when we use it for functional, empathetic means. When we truly consider what people truly need and we try to help them to get to satisfying those needs. what they truly need. That's what branding is for. I hope someone is listening out there that needs to hear this. That a phone doesn't make you important. A wig doesn't make you beautiful. A shoe doesn't make you cool. A car doesn't give you status. You determine these things through reflection, through spirituality, through good, loving relationships, through service. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and you've been listening to my podcast, ProUp Masterclass.